In a recent class on the cults, I spent 2 sessions identifying the Roman Catholic Church as having many characteristics in common with the cults. I've included a link to those classes in the description below. But surely one of the most cultic doctrines of Rome is their wicked devotion to a fictional goddess named Mary, a goddess who bears no relationship to the Mary of the Bible, but is similar in every way to the Queen of Heaven of paganism. Well, Pope Francis died this week and will be the first pope to be buried outside the Vatican in more than 120 years. The place he has chosen for his burial is the Church of Santa Maria Maggiore, located on the Esquiline Hill, one of the 7 hills of Rome. Why is this significant? Because it highlights the hopeless dogmas that Francis based his life on. Santa Maria Maggiore is the first church in the world dedicated to Mary, and is therefore considered the mother of all Marian churches. It is a church built on and perpetuated by lies. At the Council of Ephesus in 431, Mary was officially declared Theotokos, Mother of God, and Santa Maria Maggiore was built 3 years later in honor of this newly elevated mother goddess, so the origins of this place of idolatry date back more than 1,500 years. The title, Mother of God, is a false and misleading title. Mary's contribution to the virgin birth was Jesus' humanity. Mary was the mother of Jesus, the man. The divinity of Christ is another matter. The eternal Son of God, the second person of the Godhead, existed from eternity past. He had no beginning and therefore no mother. Furthermore, the Roman Catholic Church errs in attempting to make Mary sinless. The Immaculate Conception promulgated by Pope Pius IX in 1854 does not refer to the conception of Jesus, but rather to the conception of Mary. According to Catholic doctrine, she was born without sin and did not sin in her life. Catholic Answer said this: she was given the grace to be saved completely from sin so that she never committed even the slightest transgression. But the virgin birth did not require Mary to be sinless and unspotted. In fact, just the opposite. Her contribution as a human was to give Christ flesh and blood and all that goes with that. Christ experienced humanity completely, including the ability to be tempted by sin. Hebrews 4:15, for we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. It is appropriate for Francis to be buried at Santa Maria Maggiore, as he was an idolatrous Mary worshiper of the very first order. Reuters reported that St. Mary Major was dear to Francis because of his devotion to Mary, Mother of God. He prayed there before setting off on and returning from each overseas trip. I visited this church many years ago with Brother David Cloud, and I want to point out 3 things that we saw while we were there. First, near the front of the church, you come to a statue that was created at the end of World War I entitled Mary, Queen of Peace. In the statue, it is Mary who is calling for an end to the war to end all wars. Let me quote from an expert on this statue. Mary's left hand is raised up and out to the world in a gesture of basta, enough, stop the war and violence. In her right arm, she holds Christ, depicted as a small child dangling an olive branch, a symbol of peace, waiting for his mother's word to allow it to fall from his fingers and descend to the world. The image conveys a strong sense of the centrality of Mary's intercessory role in the life of the church. The dove waits for the branch to descend. The branch waits for Christ to release it, and Christ waits on the word of Mary. Well, in Rome, everything is upside down and backward, as in this statue. Here, Mary is the central figure. Christ is diminished as a weak and helpless baby. Mary holds the power. It is Mary who is to be sought. But this is a lie. Mary is not involved in heavenly decisions at all. Like every other believer, she waits for the Lord God of heaven as He works His eternal purposes in this earth. This is blasphemy against Christ. Francis, like Pope John Paul II, was a great lover of this false goddess. The second item I want to point out is a mosaic on the ceiling at the rear of the church. In this depiction, we see Mary's coronation as Queen of Heaven. Christ Himself places the crown on her head, and again, this is utter fiction. It presents the blasphemous and wicked message that this false goddess has authority and rules in heaven with Christ. Christ has no co-rulers, co-mediators, or co-redeemers. He does not need or require human assistance. Mary was a human being and possessed no special powers. She cannot hear or answer prayer. Christ, on the other hand, is God. He is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent. The ability to hear and answer prayer is a power that belongs to God alone. John 14:13, "And whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son." And the final idolatrous insult to Christ is outside the church in a gated area which is not immediately obvious to the public. It is an image of Christ and Mary participating together in the redemption of man. In Roman Catholic belief, Mary adds her sorrows to those of Christ in purchasing man's salvation. In 1935, Pope Pius XI gave Mary the title co-redemptrix. John Paul II often referred to her in this way. He said that Mary collaborated in obtaining the grace of salvation for all humanity. Well, just as Israel turned from God to worship an idol known as the Queen of Heaven, so does Rome lift up a false Queen of Heaven in opposition to God. To diminish Christ by elevating Mary to a status He alone can hold is the highest form of blasphemy. All who believe and teach such things have made themselves the enemies of God and will suffer the pains of eternal torment. It's truly tragic to watch the entire world, it would seem, as they blindly call the Pope a great man, when the truth is he was an idolater who trusted in the false goddess of Rome, a fiction that cannot save.